All right, now we're here. Now we're live on everything. Sorry, so let's restart that. I am Jack Allen. Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. Hope you are doing well today, and I appreciate anyone that's going to show up. I know I'm a few minutes late there. I was, last minute kind of stuff. It's been crazy in the Allen household with baby Louie almost home. He's so close, so close. And I was explaining before, so maybe now I don't know how this saves, so maybe you'll have to listen to this twice. But he's got this thing called like Brady premature apnea and reflux. And basically, what happens is like he'll just stop breathing. He'll like hold his breath, and so and in the beginning, you used to have to stimulate him. Like you would have to I'm not joking, like rub him really hard to wake him up. And luckily now we don't have to do that. He can pull himself out of it. And then he was on caffeine for a while. And so he had 4 days of no events. It was awesome. He was doing so well. And then they took him off the caffeine about 5 days ago. And so this was like today and yesterday and today are like the worst days because now it's fully out of his system. So he's been having a few more events but it's just been chaos, dude. It's been like a really disappointing. Like my wife, as many of you guys know, she's an ICU nurse, ICU trauma nurse. So, she's a very smart lady. So if you ever get into a bad car accident or a motorcycle accident, she's the lady that saves your life, And so she knows tons. And it's just been like really disappointing, dude. Like that they like don't know what they're doing. Like we are like the people telling them what to do. And my wife's not a NICU nurse. She doesn't know what to do with babies. And like, it's just been like utterly disappointing. Like I said, he's been in there 53 days. There's babies that come in there with like chest tubes. They get out in 5 days. And it's just crazy. Like I'm like literally considering like looking into a lawyer because it's been so bad. And like compared to the other babies that come in there, dude, it's like, he's been there way the longest. We never have the same doctor. There's been I'm not exaggerating, over 15 doctors we've had. Like nobody knows what to do. They just say, "Oh, it's just time. It's just time." And maybe that's the case, but there's just been so many mistakes, and I've been talking to an attorney because it's been that bad of care that we've received. It's just it's horrible. It's horrible. It's like stressful, obviously. And Skeptic, thanks, buddy. Thanks for always coming, dude. You're just such a kind guy, buddy. Thank you. Hopefully it's not just you tonight, Skeptic, but if it is, I love talking to you anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so that's what's going on with him. So right now, if he doesn't have an event for his Brady apnea events for 7 days, he can come home. While Liv was there, she was there tonight. He was already like kind of having a few. So if that doesn't happen, then we don't know what we're gonna do. We might like take him to another hospital. I don't know, dude. It's just hectic and crazy. We just want him home. And yeah, it kind of sucks though, because like he's doing great. He looks like I posted photos. He looks like a regular baby. He's 9 pounds. He loves to eat, and he's a great little dude. And like the fact that like it's just scary, like our modern medical system. And I honestly blame it on the not like the diversity quotas per se, but just that like everywhere we go, right? Like, hey, Rosalind, thank you for coming. But everywhere you go, like service, competency has all dropped to like insanely low levels. And I'm sure you guys have seen it too. Like I see it in my industry where you just like the good people, the good workers, they like don't exist anymore. No one cares. And I even have employees that I work with that like, and like it's a job, like and Skeptic, that's yeah. So like right, like the failure to thrive thing, that's not it, because he keeps gaining weight and stuff like that. So that's why it's more frustrating. Like we had to tell them to do a brain scan like a while ago. Like we had to suggest that. And when he kept in the 3 weeks ago, he had those bad events where we would have to physically not shake him obviously, but like wake him up. We asked like, what do we do? Should we put him back on the caffeine? They're like, oh, I guess we could. We did it. The event stopped, and it's just like Like, who's in charge here? Like, who? And if I honestly, I feel like my baby should be on like an episode of House, or like with those, like in a medical journal. Even though this is a very common thing with premature babies, it's crazy. It's crazy, dude. Like, it's so insane. This is like a. Skeptic said, "What do you call someone who graduated last in their med school class? Doctor." And dude, honest, I'm skeptic. I'm not joking. We have had, I'm not joking, in 50 days, over 15 different doctors. 15. We've had 3 different lead doctors because they each leave. It's just a madness, dude. So that's why I contacted an attorney, because, you guys don't hear all this, but it's just crazy. Just crazy. But anyway, he's doing well, though, besides that. So he's off the caffeine. So his kind of events are starting again. But like I said, he can pull himself out of them now. So that's a relief, right? Like, it's not scary. He doesn't turn blue anymore. He pulls himself out. But obviously, you don't want that. You don't want your baby to stop breathing. And, but so we don't know what we're doing yet. We don't know. So anyway, that's the update on baby Louie. But I have hopes he'll be home, soon. That's, I pray. And I think, I have faith. Like, they did the brain scan. His brain looks good, so there's no reason why it's like time. That's what they keep saying, time. But again, it's just like the doctors just like act like he's like a medical mystery, which is not reassuring at all. And so if my wife, she's a trauma nurse, like I said. So, and she's very smart. She should have been a doctor. I think that was like propaganda. I don't know about for you guys, but like when I was growing up, it was always like, oh, you're not smart enough to be a doctor. Only the smartest can be. No. Everyone that watches this show, I guarantee you, if you wanted to, you could have been a doctor. Like, if you read books, you're smarter than 99% of the public. Honestly, that's literally how I feel. But yeah, it's just crazy. So, anyway, moving on. We're gonna do part 2 of Crowley, and current events. I love the war in the Middle East going on. I drive past this boomer's house in my neighborhood, and he was a Vietnam vet. So a good guy. I'm sure he's a good guy. But in the summer, I guess some kid stole like his American flag, and he wrote out exactly, Scott, your future doctor is cheating on their med school homework. Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. I had I have the one doctor, very kind guy. He can't hear at all. He's totally like deaf. And I like called him to check how my son was doing. And he goes, "Oh, is he the one that just got an echocardiogram?" And like the nurse prior to him, the phone said, "They're calling about baby Louie, about how his brain scan went." And then last thing. So my baby can't drink breast milk yet because he had reflux. So that it caught, breast milk's too thin. So it would cause him to choke, which would get him pneumonia, blah, blah, blah. So he has to get this stuff called Infamel AR, which is for like acid reflux. So we go to give it to him. Guess what? And this is like it's not the highest level NICU care. It's the one beneath it. So it's not a low level. It's the second one. They didn't have it. So you know what I had to do? I had to go to Walmart myself to go buy it for the hospital. Craziness. But anyway, the yes, they do, Rosalind. Yes, they absolutely do. The nurses do catch a lot of the doctor's mistakes. But the war in the Middle East, right? Dude, I'm sure you guys saw the Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro fight. That's cracking me up. But it is, what is reassuring about this? And like, again, I don't want to be involved in it. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to be canceled. But what I do find amazing is how more and more Americans, and the ones waving the Palestinian flags, you guys they're idiotic as well. But just the fact that more and more people are waking up to the Zionist power that I haven't, but I should talk to John. That's a good point. He's been nice. He always says prayers and stuff, but I haven't talked to John in a little bit. I haven't really talked to many people, I gotta reach out to him one of these days though and talk to him about it. But it is reassuring though. So many people are like waking up to the Zionist control that goes on in America. And that does make me happy. Oh, the story I was saying was that this boomer in my neighborhood, his American flag was stolen in the summer, and he put up like this big bed sheet and he wrote on the sign, like, "To the 5 punks that stole my flag. I was a sharpshooter in Vietnam. I'm going to come kick your ass, blah, blah, blah. Like it was like a meme. And then, so I drive past his house like 2 weeks ago, and he has an American flag out. And then he has an American flag that has half of the Israeli flag. And then he has Israeli flags out. And it's just amazing to me. Amazing to me that like the boomer generation is just so propagandized into supporting Israel. Like they're our best friend, like Christian people, like they think like that these they're our friends, or like they're our brothers. And I'm not an anti-Semite. Like I think that's a lazy way to act. I hate how people say all white people are bad. I hate people saying all black people are bad or whatever. But the fact that like the boomer generation is so propagandized that like we should do whatever we can to help Israel. It's mind-blowing to me, dude. Like, and then yet on the same flip of the coin, they'll complain how our infrastructure is falling apart, how we're in so much debt, but they have no problem sending they'll complain about the billions to Ukraine. They have no issue sending $10 billion to Israel. They'll have no issue sending billions and billions in aid and weaponry and all this stuff like that. It's like, just, don't you guys see the hypocrisy? And then like of course, all the talking heads, Mark Levin and all these people talking about nuking Palestine and all this stuff like that. I mean, it's disgusting. It's sad. But that's the benefit, though, I think, is like our generation, even the older with the internet, more and more people are realizing, wow, maybe, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't blindly support this foreign country. Maybe we shouldn't send billions of dollars to another land. And it's just funny. Last thing on this, did you guys see the Elon Musk tweet? How someone said how like these Zionist groups promote mass migration into the West, and how, but yet, and then, or what, I forget what the tweet was, something like that, how they support this, and now they're complaining about the Palestinian protests and stuff like that. And then Elon Musk said, "So true," or whatever. And I'm not a Musk fan. I don't trust the guy, obviously, but I did find that funny. Skeptic, it's actually Charlie, my dog. He loves my wife so much. I'm like, even though I feed him, I take him out, I'm the one that does all the chores. When his mom's not home, he's a mess. He suffers from massive stress, and he's sitting here looking in the corner, looking all sad. So, but once she comes home, once he hears that door, he's going to go running home. Aren't you, Chucky? Aren't you? But yes. So anyway, guys. Yeah. Rosalind, right? It's like, that's another thing. It's crazy. If you even like to people that aren't like big, like history people, if you criticize Israel in that generation, it's like this immediate defense mechanism goes up. It's wild. It's so wild. It's like, guys, do you realize like which groups fund all the things you complain about, right? They're Zionistic groups, but you support them. They have an ethno state, but you support them. It's just wild that the propaganda is so powerful that people will defend this with knowing such little information. So that is, reassuring, or whatever you want to call it. How like that people finally are seeing like the hypocrisy in this. But anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Brian, my man, what's up? I hope you are doing it. Yeah, dude, please send me the UN initiative, that the white paper about it. I would love to see that. So last episode, we did part 1 of Aleister Crowley, and I always screw up the book title. I always do a bad job with that. And I want to tell you, because it's a really good book. And someone tweeted at me or whatever to read William Ramsey's book. And I have never read his on Crowley, but I'm sure it's very good. So you should check that one out too, if you like this topic. But so this book is called Secret Agent 666, Aleister Crowley, British Intelligence. And that's all I can see from my Kindle. But go get the book if you like it, because it's amazing. So I always ask this question, right? What is the link between the occult, secret societies, and spycraft? And this book is, and I haven't found the answer yet, but this book is bringing me closer and closer and closer to that answer. And I won't go over really what we talked about last episode, because I already wasted too much time about this. But hey, Raven, hey, thanks for saying hello and stopping by. That was so sweet of you. So sweet of you. But Go watch the part 1 if you want, Crowley, but it's amazing, dude. I have always viewed Crowley as just this occultist, this kind of nut job. And no, dude, he was a spy. He was a spy. That's what he was. He was a spy. He used it. He did practice tons of magic. He loved banging dudes, sodomizing, sex magic. He was big into that. And he was kind of like a precursor to Jeffrey Epstein, right? So he would get involved with a lot of these upper echelon British Navy, military, whatever. And he would blackmail them. He would, hey, you banged that dude the other night, or you let me bang you. You better do what I say, or I'm going to tell everybody that you're letting me sodomize you on the weekends. And so he was kind of a precursor to a Jeffrey Epstein-like character. So I found that interesting as well. So anyway, we'll start here. And so Crowley was very known for using false identities. He was fake passport galore. And obviously this is much easier in 1915, but not that easy. And we'll learn more. People got caught all the time. And so the big one here. So he eventually ends up in America in 1914, and he comes as an Irishman. Okay. And he sails in 1914 on the Lusitania. And we're going to get into that because he had a key role in that event. But he came over as a well-dressed man. He was 40 years old. He had a limp. And on the manifest, there was a man on the ship named Edwards Alexander Crowley. Wonder who that might be, right? Obviously, that's Aleister Crowley. And he was an Irishman. And weird, he landed on the shores on Halloween. And we're going to see more and more of his protest events that happen on occult significant days. Okay. My hair's a little messed up here. Got a haircut, but it got a little messed up. But anyway. So when landing, he supposedly had he always had a backstory, just like spies. And that last thing too, that's this book also. I mean, I'm obsessed with that late 1800s, 1900s time period. I love it. I love the outfits. I love everything about it. And it really made me realize why Alan Dulles loved spycraft, because at this time, it took real talent, dude. It took real thought. These days, they just search your phone and monitor everything you say. That's not spycraft. You're going to see what Crowley did, what these guys had to do. And it was fun, dude. It was like real not brainiac, but ingenuity and smartness and intellect and double agents and stuff like that. Like, it was interesting, right? And now again, like today, it's so lame. They just like monitor. That's all they have to do. They just monitor our electronics. Like, that's not spycraft. Propaganda to a degree, but you just show videos of girls with cleavage and shaking their butts, and so you get people just addicted to pornography or whatever. That's all you have to do. It's boring. It's lame. It's boring, but not back then, dude. Not back then. So he has a business meeting. That's why he's going to America. Just like, because last episode we talked about, he was all over China and all these different places. Same kind of reasons. But so his business meeting just happened to fall through when he landed on the shores. And so this deal was supposedly in the realm of, in today's cash in 2008, $500 million. So obviously a boatload of cash, right? And so in 2008, as we know, that's probably what? Maybe close to $1 billion today. So his commission was probably pretty modest, but still huge enough, right? And he was most likely a bag man in this deal. They aren't, Skeptic brings up a good, they're probably not even monitoring, just using AI and keywords. Exactly, dude. Exactly, dude. And wait till you guys hear some of the stuff Crowley did. It's brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, like, this guy was, again, I used to think of him as just like a magician. He was so much more than that. So soon as the war started in Europe, it was a race between Germany and the Brits in Europe to secure financing and war materials from American business. And men were welcome to receive them, American businessmen. George Bush's Prescott Bush, or was it his father? Yeah, no, it's Prescott Bush. I think his company produced 75 of the arms utilized in World War I, and on both sides, right? So this was, nothing changes. Nothing changes. It's the same exact thing. War is always very financially beneficial to those in power. But at the time, Woodrow Wilson, as many of you know, he ran on the slogan, "Stay out of the war in Europe," right? That didn't last long. And so he had a Secretary of State, this guy William Bryan. And William Bryan was a pacifist. He made a law declaring he prohibited Americans from providing loans or military goods to warring nations. And Wilson even supported America's neutrality at this point. But U.S. law did allow foreign nations to raise loans in America. And Germans were the first to hit that, to be there to start trying to do that. So the second week of August in 1914, two German bankers under fake names, who would eventually come out to be Dr. Bernard Dernberg and Max Warburg. Oh, who is Max Warburg? Oh, no way. Wasn't his brother in charge of helped create the Federal Reserve? Oh, imagine that. But he was head of the Warburg Bank in Hamburg, and he was the financial minister to the Kaiser, carrying over $175 million in German treasury certificates to the U.S. I mean, that's in 1914. God knows how much money that is today, probably in the billions. And he had his first stop, the offices of Kuhn and Loeb, the banking house that, Kuhn and Loeb got their money. Well, they got their money selling war uniforms to the Union soldiers in the Civil War. So, two lovely individuals that also profiteered off of massive violence and death. Man, bankers, they're just such good guys, right? But this banking house was very closely linked to the Warburgs back in Germany. And the two brothers of the banking house were son-in-laws of Jacob Schiff. The Schiff and the Warburgs, all German Jewish people who had financial ties to Germany. Whereas J.P. Morgan, he was more closely allied with Britain and hostile to Germany. And Morgan was able to ensure the Britons that to access to Americans' finances, and Germany would not be getting those finances. And it was funny, like at the time in America, if you wanted money, if you wanted a Gentile bank, you would go to J.P. Morgan. If you wanted a Jewish bank, I think you would go to the Rothschilds or Kuhn and Loeb. Again, both are ran by the Rothschilds at this point. It's a falsity. It's a lie. It's the two birds of the same feather kind of thing, but just another trick played on Americans even back then. And so this would create animosity, and the Germans were using submarine warfare to stem the transatlantic flow of arms and munitions for the Brits. And I don't know how much you guys know about World War I. I loved that book. I don't know if good, but I enjoyed the book. So if I thought it was a good series on World War I. So you should definitely, thank you, Skeptic. 175 million in 1914. $5.26 billion in 2023 was brought over from Germany. Wow. But I don't know if you guys know this, but the submarine warfare starting a war before America got involved, the war was over, guys. Germany won the war. Brits were done. The French were weeks away from starving. The Brits were weeks away from starving, from being without supplies. It was over. And Germany started letting up on the submarine warfare because the Kaiser, they were goaded into this war heavily by the British. The British were jealous of the British, the French, whatever. They wanted to show how great republics and democracies are and how evil monarchies are. And so they were jealous that Germany was surpassing them technologically, economically. And submarines were one of those assets. Like literally, Germany won the war. The war was over if they would have just kept up on it, but they let off because they didn't want to kill all these Europeans. They didn't want to do this, but don't worry. The bankers wanted it. Bankers wanted that war to continue. And that's why they extended the war an extra at least 3 to 5 years. The war could have ended much sooner than that, but they wanted to extend it because what's more important, lives or money? But yeah, so Germany was just whooping the Allies with their submarine warfare. And so another advantage also was that there was a spy inside Kuhn and Loeb. He was this guy, Otto Kahn, who was a German Jewish guy, but he was a British subject. And he was the main weapon the British intelligence used against the Germans in America. And Max Warburg, he would leave Germany as pretty much as quietly as he had arrived. His partner Dernberg would stay, and they would head up the Red Cross operation in New York. Again, we see the use of NGOs, of charity organizations being utilized as spy organizations, just how they used anthropology in foreign nations. Did they really care? Did they study? Were they there to study what the people believed in, what they were like? Or were they there to study what could we utilize to harm how can we use this to wage war against somebody? They did this in Vietnam. They did this in the Philippines. I did, that Vietnam, what Operation Phoenix, how they played on superstitions that they learned from anthropology and from Edward Lansdale, the colonel. They were afraid of like vampires or something like that. And to get the Vietnamese to help, they drained the blood out of people and would hang them to say that these were vampires because they weren't helping the Americans. And, the people that run us are sick. They're disgusting. They're disgusting people. They're disgusting people. I don't want to be that guy, but it seems like an awful lot of the movers and shakers have, and I'm not going to finish reading that one, Skeptic, but it does seem like an odd coincidence. And anyone hear about Hollywood making The Last Samurai with Bill Burr? No, I did not, Brian, but that does not surprise me. Off topic. I don't know if you guys heard this. So you want to know why they keep doing remakes and why there's no good movies anymore, besides the woke culture, is because before movies would get 2 sales. They would get, the funding in the movie theaters, and then it would go on DVD. So you could make these movies that were new ideas, that were riskier, that were, Goodwill Hunting or whatever, all these classics that ended with our generation. That's why all you have are superhero movies and remakes, because they're guaranteed, except for the Marvels, which flopped. Awesome. I haven't watched a Marvel movie since the Endgame, but that's why these are the only movies that come out, is because they need to make all their money when it comes out to theaters, because after that, it's done. But yeah, so Warburg's partner would head up the Red Cross operation because he wants to help charity. He wants to help save people. Right? Yes. Yeah. Anyway, take the Little Mermaid, for example, race and gender swaps. Exactly, dude. It's just, and that's why it's sad, right? Like, guys, think of all the classic movies that we talk about. I mean, even things as silly as like Wedding Crashers and Old School and everything. There's nothing good that comes out. I am watching Napoleon when it comes out, and I saw an art, and it makes me sad. I'm still going to see it. Oh my God. Did you guys see my one nurse sewed my baby a Napoleon hat? Adorable. I'm going to wear my hat the one day and take a photo. But, there's so many novels that they can make into great movies, Rosalind, so many, but they don't. And, I've already heard, like, the one article I saw on Napoleon was like, are you worried they're going to glorify a dictator? They don't, which breaks my heart, dude. It breaks my heart. And I kind of knew that. I'm still going to go see it with my dad. My birthday's coming up in 3 days. And I'm like a Jehovah's Witness. I hate birthdays. I don't celebrate my birthday. I don't care. I'm too old. I'm going to be 33. I don't care about birthdays anymore, but we're going to do that as a birthday gift or whatever. But anyway, yeah, that's what I heard, Brian. He didn't do it nicely, and it's sad, but I'm still going to see it. I'm not like a tough movie critic. I'm not, it doesn't take a lot to get me entertained, but I am going to be just, it sucks, right? Like, it's just sad. But anyway, so it was known that this wasn't going to be a quick war. Lots of money was going to be made. And what did the U.S. do? They got rid of the peace pacifist William Bryan, and they changed the law about, selling war supplies to belligerents, and the floodgates opened. And so the British war purchasing firm focused on J.P. Morgan, and the Beast, Crowley, was a major factor in making that deal happen with J.P. Morgan. What? Aleister Crowley working with bankers? What? And why was he that? Well, because Crowley was always in need of cash, but he was able to maintain residence at some of Manhattan's most finest establishments. And Crowley would remain close with another British agent. His name was Casement, who was well known for his homosexual promiscuity. He would actually be knighted and then later hung as a traitor. And Crowley was also close with Casement because Casement was an Irish nationalist, the same guys that Crowley would use. Now, and he would be hanged because of his association with Irish nationalism. Now, why would Crowley, and we're going to find out later, who was that was his spy name, he's an Irish nationalist. Why wouldn't he be hung? He would write letters like "Death to England, blood, not until we will drop every blood until Ireland is free." Why wouldn't England hang him as a traitor? Huh. It's weird, right? I wonder why that was. So even then, though, we see the use of blackmail, of homosexuality, something that Crowley was well known for. He didn't hide it. And his close association provided ample blackmail. And of course, we never seen that again, right? So that's why I say that Crowley was kind of a precursor to Jeffrey Epstein. He's bringing people into his secret societies that are doing sex magic. That includes a lot of homosexuality. And he uses it as blackmail against them. Or he's informing on them to back to the crown, back to his spy master. And again, blackmail. So it's amazing, right? I just found that this book's helping me learn so much more about Crowley than what I thought he was. I just thought he was just a nut job, but he was so much more about that. Lusitania running guns to Europe. That's why the Germans targeted. And Skeptic, you are going to love what I'm going to say about this in a little bit about the Lusitania, because we're going to get into it in a second. I know it's never the hot people that are into the freaky stuff. You're right, dude. It never is. It's always the weirdos, dude. Always the weirdos. Dude, but this is funny. There's a letter, and I'm sure they won't put this in the movie, but there's a letter Napoleon writes to Josephine, and he writes to her, I guess he's about to return home or something like that. And he says, "Do not bathe. Do not bathe. I will be home in 4 days. Do not bathe, Josephine." And I was thinking, damn, you freak, Napoleon. Like, ew, bro. Like, what? You know, your wife did not bathe for 4 days? Like, what freaky stuff are you into, dude? But anyway, Crowley never knew really who his boss was. It was kind of like the movie with the DC movie where the bad guy, the Suicide Squad. I think that's the movie where they let the bad guys out and they did not. So the government would say, "Hey, we're going to let you out." So Crowley is like the Suicide Squad, but we're going to deny any involvement with you if you get caught. You're on your own. And so he had a boss that he kind of reported to, who was this guy, Chief Admiral Hall. But Crowley never really had contact with Hall. Yes, the zigzag was worth it. Skeptic, good memory. And that was Josephine, for people that don't know, Napoleon's wife. She was known for the zigzag, which was her special sexual technique that drove men crazy. But so anyway, Admiral Hall was like the chief spy boss of all the spies, of all the spy assets. But Crowley had very little contact, if any, at all with spies. So Hall would use other people that Crowley would have to communicate with to, find out what his next plan was. But he kind of had a lot of open reign, to be honest. Many of the British spies, though, refuse assets. I use assets because they spies and assets interchangeably, but they're not officers. They're assets. There's a clear distinction there. Officers are acknowledged working for the British government. Assets are like the Suicide Squad, where they're getting paid, but through dubious ways, through money laundering. And they would never, if they were caught, they would never be admitted by the Brits that they're working for them. So the British spies, though, they refused to work with Crowley. They're playing their roles, calling Crowley despicable, denying any knowledge of working together. And this is also called compartmentalization. And they still do that today, right? Like I don't know today, again, spycraft is so weak today, but at least in World War II, where one guy doesn't know what the other's doing, maybe this guy's a spy, but he's also a spy. It's all this kind of thing where they're all just, everyone has a similar goal, but they don't know who's with who. And the movie U.S. Marshals explained this too. They called them kites, people that work for the government with no official connection. If they got caught, the string was cut and they were on their own. Wow, exactly. Yeah. So kites. That's exactly what he was. See, Skeptic, you always add such good little tidbits of information, buddy. Always appreciate it. But only the very few of the top knew of Crowley's true allegiance. And I brought this back. I talked about this in the first episode, but Crowley took an oath to the crown that he would always serve the crown. And he took his oath seriously, just like the oaths he took seriously for his secret societies. You know, he got down on the one knee, blah, 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 would always support the crown. So again, we think of Crowley, if you like level 1, whatever, level 2 conspiracy theorists, when you talk about Crowley, they would just tell you he's a, you know, occultist, whatever. But he was so much more than that. He wasn't a occultist. Yes, he ran secret societies, but many of these, and he loved doing sex magic. He loved doing magic and all that stuff. But I think he used his connections as a spy to do these occult rituals, as opposed to, yeah, I think that's why he did it. It allowed him free reign to kind of do the sodomies, do the orgies, do the sex magic. Hey, Susan, thanks for stopping. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming by. So let's get back to why Crowley's true purpose in Manhattan. So he's an Irish nationalist, right? He's palling up with the Irish nationalists. At the time, the Irish nationalists, they're cooperating with the Germans because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the Irish nationalists, they hate England. Germans hate England. And so he's Crowley's false Irish passport. He fell in right along with the German propagandists. And one of Crowley's first magical sex partners was this woman of color. She was the daughter of the first African-American graduate of Harvard. She had lighter skin and green eyes. And JP Morgan would eventually hire this girl to oversee his museum and collections as a position she held for 40 years. And what was her forte? Books, and mainly ancient books. I found that interesting. So yet again, we see banking, spies, magic tying together. I think recruit important people into your secret society, leverage freaky sex magic, blackmail them into working with you. I think that's perfect, Skeptic. That's exactly it. It's exactly it. That's the best. That's a better explanation. But so this woman of color that Crowley was banging for sex magic, who worked for JP Morgan, she would sell books and other rare goods to help fund the British spy agencies and launder that money. Just how they use art, the art world to launder money today. They're doing this already in 1914. And she had access to very rare occultic books. Thus, this is a perfect person for Crowley to associate with. So one could make the association that JP Morgan helped finance Crowley through his librarian to the British Secret Service, to the Beast through this, her last name was Green, this Harvard graduate. And Crowley was the perfect spy. He infiltrated the German intelligence apparatus, getting funded through JP Morgan and his artwork. And so in 1914, the Germans started planning an aggressive propaganda campaign against the Yankees' opinion, led by the propaganda cabinet. And basically, they tried to bully America into supporting them. And Crowley would conspicuously advocate the bullying of Germany. He said, yeah, that's a good idea. Bully the Americans into supporting us. That's how we're going to do it. And Germany even tried using Indian nationalists to cause chaos in British India and Canada and trying to get them to assassinate political leaders to create chaos. So again, I just found this amazing that in 1914, I mean, brilliance, right? Like using, color revolutions, whatever you want to call it, to overthrow, cause chaos in opposing governments. And what does the CIA do? They did the same thing. I mean, who do we fund? What does Israel do? They're the ones that built and financially supported Hamas. Why? You cause chaos. Palestine can't get a cohesive group. You make them look horrible. The Black Panther Party, what did they do? What is it called? Skeptic, what is it called? The operation when you send somebody in to cause chaos, to distill distrust and unfavorability. Come on, what's Skeptic knows? Somebody knows in the chat. What's Operation? Jesus, I'm blanking on this. COINTELPRO. Thank you. I knew you know it, Skeptic. So even in 1914, the Germans and the British are using COINTELPRO tactics to cause chaos against their enemies. And Admiral Hall, he was very anxious about the mounting threat, and he knew counter propaganda alone would not solve the German propaganda issue. And so he figured the best way to expose the German intrigues and propaganda was to expose the American public, who would abhor the destruction of property and the fomenting of a rebellion on their soil. So Hall basically wanted to make the Germans as beastly, as violent as possible. That was his goal. That's what he thought would work best to dissuade America from supporting Germany, because at the time we wanted to remain neutral. Plus, we did also want to support Germany. Teddy Roosevelt was very close with Germans. A lot of Germans were very close to upper echelons of power. We were pretty pro-German. And I think something like, there was a huge number of Germans in Pennsylvania, at least where I'm from. Lots of pro-German sentiment in America at the time. So Admiral Hall had his work cut out for him. So Hall, he communicated his ideas to this guy Gaunt, who promoted the writings of extreme German nationalists, and Crowley would help promote these ideas further. And his quote was, "My real scheme was to integrate myself with the other side, that I should obtain their full confidence, so to be able to betray their plans to England." And Crowley writes all this stuff down in his diary. That's how we have these direct quotes. And Crowley claims he was able to do this by sheer luck in 1915. So according to the story, and is this true? Who knows? Crowley's riding a bus. He's on public transportation, I think a bus, and he just sits close. He happens to sit close to this guy who a man who was later identified as a guy named O'Brien. Yeah, the American Nazi Party in the 1930s. Exactly. And Crowley was just happened to be speaking super loudly on the bus to himself. I don't know, probably speaking really loud about how he was in favor of Germany in a poor Irish accent. And he vouched himself as an Irish patriot. And O'Brien, he was an Irish patriot. He said, "Hey," he had turned around and said, "Oh, you're an Irish patriot too? But you should come with me. Come to my office." And the magician, that was his first step in. He got it, his first step in. And pretty soon the beast found himself at the office of a paper called The Fatherland, which is a publication ran by this guy, George Viverick. And Viverick would offer Crowley, my misspelling, Crowley, a job writing for the magazine. And Crowley realized The Fatherland was the cue of the German propaganda. Was like the QAnon of the German propaganda, which was subsidized by this guy, Dr. Albert, whose express aim was influencing American opinion. So already we see this is a war of propaganda between Brits and the Germans because Germany knew they're going to win the war, but they knew that so their main goal isn't to get America into the war. Their main goal is to keep America out of the war, because their submarines, like I said, the Allies were toast. They were weeks away from done. And the Germans tried to get them to ceasefire, try to get peace. They tried to stop the war multiple times, and they would not give in. Because what's another 100,000 lives, right? It's not you dying, bankers. It's not your son's in the war. So anyway, Viverick would offer Crowley a job, and the beast solidified himself in enemy camp right there, right where Admiral Hall wanted him to be. And as a member of the Fatherland, he was a Viverick George Viverick, who was, the leader of the fatherland, he to himself was an occultist. He was a member of the Ancient Order of the Druids, which was a German branch. It was a Masonic body. You know who also was a member of the Ancient Order of the Druids? Oh, none other than Winston Churchill, who joined in 1908. So by World War I, it promoted a pan-German agenda, an expansionist policy, thus ideal recruiting ground for Germany's cause. So again, these secret societies are used for far more than just practicing magic. They're used to, just like Skeptic said, get high-ranking people, blackmail them, etc., etc. Oh, I absolutely, yeah. And Skeptic brings up how Germany gets the blame for World War One. And again, guys, if you want to learn more or just read the book, I forget what the book's called. I did a few episodes on World War One of how it was totally instigated by the West. Germany really wanted no part of it. They kept trying to offer peace. It was just a jealousy thing between the British. Go check out those episodes, or I think The Secret History of World War One, maybe. And then they wrote another book, Prolonging Agony, how the Allies extended the war when it could have ended. But yeah. So history is written by the victors, right? Right. So anyway. Crowley had another Irish native who he brought into the group, giving him even more credit among the Germans. So Crowley is so good at solidify. Again, I wonder, did he talk in an Irish accent the whole time? I don't know. They didn't say it in the book. I imagine so. If he's an Irish passport, he had to. But I just found that funny. He just is Crowley he must be a pretty good actor too, right? So anyway, members of this Druid group, they knew Churchill. Also, there was these people in Germany's Druid group that were guests at Churchill's wedding. So, again, are these guys really enemies at the top? I don't know. I don't think so. I think the Kaiser was an enemy. I think the inner circle is the enemy. But as we're going to see, I think a lot of the top German spies were members of these secret societies. They were connected with the banking cartels, and they didn't want Germany to win. They knew that they were getting a big payday if they made sure Britain won. And thanks, Corey. Sorry, Skeptic. It's a great quote, or a great message, but I didn't mean to put it up there. And hey, blessings to you, buddy. And thanks for saying you appreciate the work. I also always wondered if rooting out Europe's royal had any part in World War I. That's absolutely was, in my opinion, Brian. It was to ruin the monarchies. It was to prove that democracy and the republics, that's how you have a strong, in central banking, that's how you win wars. It's not, or that's how you have a strong, openly fair, free country. Wilhelm, King George, and the Tsar Nicholas were all cousins. And they all look alike. There's a great photo where they're so looking similar. And I remember before World War I really kicked off, Kaiser Wilhelm had dinner with, I don't think it was King George. I think it was King George's brother, trying to say, dude, I don't want to fight you. Why are we doing this? We're family. We're family. And again, how much power did King George have? He was probably so indebted to the Bank of England at the time. Yeah. And the Windsors were also German. It's just, again, I really think it was a war to end the monarchies, to establish central banks all through Europe, and to destroy Germany. And I don't want to get too deep. I don't want to get kicked off of platforms, but the Germans were hated by a group that holds that a lot of bankers are, a lot of Zionists are, and they held this grudge against the Germans when Titus killed all of them in Judea and during the Roman Empire. And I think I think that's why Germany has always been the bad guy. I think a lot of it has to do with that. I met Crowley's direct descendants, not as weird as you would think. And Corey, it doesn't surprise me, because as we continue, if you continue listening, or if you continue watching the show, Crowley is not as weird as you think at all. He's a brilliant guy. So basically, so many names of the British higher ups, spies, Navy, et cetera, were members of occultic German secret societies that infiltrated and acted as spies using their occult groups to spy on German spies, acted as double agents, just like Crowley. And so now back to our very important character, George Vivarek, the lead editor of the Fatherland, the propaganda. So Vivarek, he's born in 1884. He's a socialist who serves time in the Kaiser's jails for being a socialist. He renounces his Marxist ways. He makes his way to America with his wife and son, and he also enjoyed sex magic. Jesus, I think Skeptic said, all these guys are freaks, dude. They're freaks. And is it power that makes you a freak, or is it you have to be a freak to gain power? I don't know what's the chicken or the egg, but one comes first. But so Vivarek, he's very sexually ambiguous. He's a pagan. He would publish a book. He was, this is fascinating, guys, this part right here. So George Vivarek, he was a protege to this guy, Hugo Munstenberg. Both were friends with Teddy Roosevelt, who was a Germanophile. Vivarek would write poems and short stories about vampires. Search vampires. Think about vampires. Think about what hurts vampires. That's all I'll say. Okay. Skeptic probably knows what I'm talking about. But vampires were a Gentile creation, a metaphor, if you will. They're scared of crucifixes. So yes, they are a metaphor for something. But anyway, a lot of Vivarek's short stories had homosexual overtones. There were psychic spies and much more. His characters had a fondness for orgies. I'm sure, again, they were just characters. That's it. So weird, since Crowley shared a lot of similar fondness of sex magic, orgies. Did Crowley offer Vivarek into his OTO group? Weirdly, also Vivarek claimed to be the Kaiser's son or the grandson of Kaiser Wilhelm I. So Crowley basically turned Vivarek using blackmail because of his love of orgies and homosexuality. So again, this is why I say Crowley was a precursor, and probably not the first, to Jeffrey Epstein. Banking, ties to banking. I don't want to repeat myself too much. And Crowley would be denied British intelligence involvement until the 1930s, but they would eventually admit it. And Crowley would brag how he worked upon the mind of Vivarek to such an extent that he went along with anything he suggested. Now, was this hypnotism? Was this occultism? Was this, what was the power he had over Vivarek? Was it just blackmail? I kind of think it was probably a little bit of drugs, blackmail. I think it was a little bit of all three. The original vampire is Judas Iscariot. Oh, interesting. No more, everyone. Come on, stop that. And again, I have to say this. I love everyone. It is unfair to label any group as evil. That's laziness. But yes, there is a metaphor there with vampires. So anyway, Vivarek accepted Crowley as an authentic black magician. He would run all of Crowley's stories, ideas in the magazines, in the Fatherland, and other journals, and another magazine, The International, in which he made Crowley the lead editor of that paper. It was almost like Crowley casted a spell over Vivarek. And Crowley said Vivarek's biggest flaw was his repressed homosexuality. And he says this because, obviously, blackmail. And Crowley did not believe Vivarek was the top propaganda dog for the Germans. He was too weak, and he knew there was somebody above him, and he had to meet who was above him. And so Crowley would court this guy named Ewers, which was a Vivarek acquaintance. And he broke the ice by asking him to translate his Gnostic mass that he was doing, which was an OTO ritual. A job that would finally fall to this guy, Theodor Reuss, who was a big time German occultist, and he was the top German propagandist in America at the time. And so Crowley, Vivarek, and Reuss would actually share an address in New York City, sharing with another paper that was originally a paper for the Europeans in America, but which would become another propaganda tool for the Germans. And so it's really amazing, again, that this total weirdo, insane nut job Crowley was able to infiltrate the upper echelons of German spycraft and propaganda. So again, I just bring this up because I always saw Crowley. That's what I thought he was, just a psycho. He clearly wasn't. I mean, these guys and these top spies of Germany, they're not idiots. They're not dummies, right? These are smart people. These are some of the best of the best. And which obviously makes Crowley a very influential, a very convincing, right? A very smart guy. And these papers were also being used to launder propaganda money to spies in America from Germany to help sway public opinion. And eventually, Crowley would decide that the top boss was this. Oh, I'm sorry. Royce wasn't the top boss. Now I'm getting back to this Mustenberg guy. This was what I found blew my mind, guys. So that Crowley would eventually decide the top boss was this highly respected Jewish American, Hugo Mustenberg, who supported the German cause until his unusual and untimely wink wink assassination, death in 1916. And he was best buddies with Teddy Roosevelt. So listen to this, guys. So Hugo Mustenberg, who died in 1916, what did he do for a living? Well, he was a professor at Harvard, a lead professor at Harvard. And not only that, Hugo Mustenberg is best known as one of the founding fathers of modern psychology. What was one of his major works? His writings include a work on, quote, the influence of motion pictures and radio on mass psychology. So isn't that mind-blowing that this Jewish German occultist who studied the effect of radio and motion pictures on the the molding of minds. So even in 1916, and we talked about this before, how the Jesuits the Jesuits realized how powerful plays were, how that I think the quote was like one play was more powerful than 100 sermons in converting people back to Catholicism. But even in 1916, this guy, Hugo Mustenberg, was playing around with manipulating of minds. And Crowley would say that he had made a special study for years of the psychology of Americans. He was a man of ripe wisdom, a teacher of Harvard, who had the habit of forming and directing minds. So even back then, we see the linkage of psychology, propaganda, and mind manipulation way before Edward Bernays. And Bernays would take a lot of Hugo Mustenberg's work. And Mustenberg's quote, "Day and night, I work both before and behind the scene, entirely in the interest of the political struggle. And fortunately, I accomplished much." And Mustenberg took a deep interest in the paranormal phenomena, like the mediums, like psychics. And Crowley said that Mustenberg's Achilles heel was that he always thought he was right. And Crowley would use his confidence against him, constantly telling him, "Oh, you're so right, Mustenberg. You're so right," nudging him to abandon rationality for violent and stupid rhetoric. So what did we talk about? How Admiral Hall, the lead guy in Britain, what did he want? He wanted to show Americans how Germans were these violent beasts. And what did Crowley do? He encouraged Mustenberg to do that exact thing, to use that, to promote that how violent and tough the Germans were. And he did just that. And in 1915, Crowley was fully immersed in the papers. He gained the trust of all three of these powerful German propagandists. And he even bugged the offices of the newspapers. And bugging was in his infancy in the 1915. I mean, think of how big a bug had to be in the early 1900s. But the offices still of Germany, of the fatherland, they were all checked regularly. But what would you know? Somehow an electronic monitoring device would be found in a telephone at the office. And Vivek and his team would admit, they would say, "We cannot find out how the British keep finding out all of our communications and our secrets. How do they do this?" Did they ever think Crowley might be the guy? Never. And all at one point, the New York papers reported how the U.S. arrested 3 men trying to obtain fraudulent U.S. passports. And one of these Germans, they spilled the beans about a bigger plot involving Vivek and Ewers and another German American reservist in the Kaiser's army, how they were getting money and all this spy stuff. And Vivek would deny any involvement, basically like like how he said the Suicide Squad, saying, "Oh, I have no idea who these guys are." And in any case, the case would be dropped due to evidence. But the publicity, it was published all the newspapers by the British, and it publicly ruined again more German image, even more in the United States. So again, propaganda is so powerful. So just step by step, we're chipping away. The Brits are chipping away the American support or neutrality of the Germans. And we're going to get to what the biggest chip was in a second. And many of you know what that is, sinking of a ship. But the Americans were very coy with how they got the goods on this fraudulent scheme. They claimed that an anonymous female clerk in the photography studio, the passport office, became suspicious of these 3 men. Why was she suspicious? No. What happened was that Crowley knew what they were doing, ratted the trio out to the British. The British told the American authorities, and boom, they were arrested. And here we go. The moment we've been waiting for, the sinking of the Lusitania. So in 1915, do I have my Lusitania? Oh, no, that's in my office, the sinking of the Lusitania paper. But in 1915, this girl, Lila Waddell, who was who would be Crowley's Scarlet Woman, who we met when she met Crowley. Actually, this was in episode 1. We talked about her. She was one of his ragtime rag girls Crowley had this little musical group to go to Russia to spy on them. It wasn't a music group, but that was the guy. Just like how they used Houdini as a spy, Crowley was a spy using his music group because the Russian court was very difficult to get into. And that was how they got in, was this music group. So that was where Crowley, when she was Crowley's Scarlet Woman, she would later go insane. I think she killed herself, much like many of the women that were involved in Crowley's life. But she informed Crowley or whatever of what she saw on the Lusitania. And do you know what she saw on the Lusitania, guys? She saw that the Lusitania was carrying concealed weapons and illegal munitions, and that the British, that it was the British were going to use it as a terrorist assault on an unarmed. Anyway, I don't know what I wrote there, but anyway, Lila was the girl that broke this news, that told Crowley, or Crowley also, he was same on the Lusitania, so he also could have shared this quote unquote inside intel. But just wait for a second here, because that's what I thought, that the Lusitania carried these weapons, which is possible, and Mary Mel may have, but just wait a second. So many theories exist on this ship. And I have the newspaper article in my office, and I always knew it was a false flag of sorts. But I found these differing theories very interesting, and I never heard of them before. So I wanted, because Skeptic brought it up, so I wanted you guys to hear the theories as well. So the one theory was that it was a British conspiracy hatched within the Admiralty, that they snuck they told the Germans essentially through their spies that there was munitions on the ship, that it was straight from Winston Churchill and others, that these men basically set the liner up for destruction to tar the Germans with the blame. So I like that theory better than the one that the British secretly had munitions and stuff, or the Americans loaded it or whatever, that it was actually, maybe it had some guns on it, maybe it didn't, but in reality, the British they told this information to the spies, to Crowley, to tell the Germans this, so they would sink it. Or the ship was always also because the ship always carried many Americans. And so the British knew it would be a great way to bring America into their losing side of the war, to help change the tides of the war. And the mainstream media history will tell you is truly just an act of German violence, that no guns existed on the ship. All the gun talk was conspiracy. And regardless where you stand, it was interesting that the British saw no reason to assign escorts to the ship when she reached British waters, especially during the war. The German U-boats are sinking all the ships coming into Britain at the time. But this ship that's holding Americans and civilians, that, okay, say it has no guns on it, whatever, fine. You're not going to send escorts with it to protect it? Are you hoping it's going to get sunk, maybe? Are you hoping to do that so you can show how evil the Germans are? So at minimum, if the British did not encourage attack, they certainly, without a doubt, allowed it to happen, knowing what the American opinion would be. And this is what they did with Pearl Harbor. At minimum, if not provocation, which they did, at minimum, they knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen. They allowed it to happen. And and this is how sick our leaders are. They're sick enough to sacrifice hundreds of lives, which would lead to the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of lives. But anyone willing to do this certainly would not write it down on a note, right? Like, hey, you ready for the for the slaughter of hundreds of people? But what if I told you that Crowley played, if not the biggest role, a huge role in the sinking of this ship? Would you believe me? Crowley boasted in his diary of having proved that Lucy was a ship of war in a piece for the fatherland. He wrote this in an article of the Fatherland, published after the sinking of the ship, of course. But the Beast would write an article, and somehow Vivek and crew could not realize how disgusting Americans would view the article. And to any sane human being like that, like Vivek and these three smart German propagandists, they allowed Crowley to write this article bragging why the Germans sunk the ship because it carried munitions or whatever, and thinking that that was a good idea. Because Crowley had some weird control over these people. And was it magical? Was it blackmail? What was it? I don't know. But there was some power he had over them. And if you don't remember, Crowley rode this ship just a few months earlier. And with the Germans in his ear, he could have also told them of the guns and the munitions that he, quote unquote, witnessed on the ship. And so could have lied to Waddell, his Scarlet Woman. So in 1933, Crowley would brag how he got the Germans to believe that arrogance and violence were sound policies to Americans. Again, exactly what Admiral Hall wanted the Germans to do. And Crowley would help encourage the U-boat attacks against the neutrals to draw Americans into the fray. And again, why is Germany listening to Crowley? Like, what he had so much power over these people that it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe because, again, like if I'm a German nationalist and I don't want Americans to come into the war, would I attack a neutral country's civilians? Would fear alone be enough to keep a foreign land out of the war that I'm trying to get a year earlier, I'm trying to get funding, arms, munitions from? No, not at all. Like, right? That doesn't make any sense to me, but there was powerful. Yeah. Skeptics said diabolical, however you slice it. If it was running ammo or not, sinking caused enough American outrage to enter the war. Exactly. And that's why it's so crazy to me that Crowley was powerful enough to either to make them believe that was true and to then write an article almost bragging about it. So it's just eventually Crowley would confide in this guy Langland, who was the author of a famous science fiction book, The Fly, and other spy stories that were based on Crowley's experiences. He had close ties with British intelligence. Langland in the 60s would claim that Crowley was responsible for the torpedoing of the Lusitania because his influence reached the top of German spy craft in the U.S. through his connections with the Fatherland paper and Vivek and Mustenberg's. And the Germans shockingly put great faith in the Beast's intuition and magic and saw him as a guide to the mentality of the Americans and British. And somehow he was able to predict the reactions of the Americans. and could somehow see the inner, he somehow this ability to see the inner sanctums of the English crown in Whitehall. Somehow he knew what they were going to think, feel, do, and yet these German propagandists never once thought, I wonder if this guy's a double agent. He seems to know a lot. I mean, that's embarrassing as hell, right? They should have been ashamed of themselves. And again, the only reason I can think they didn't think of this is the occult aspect, because he was so, degenerate, did so much gross stuff. They thought, no way, this guy's working for the British. He's so disgusting. Like, he's sodomizing, having huge orgies, like sacrificing people. No way the British would hire this guy. And Crowley's reputation as an expert in supernatural methods and forces, maybe that impressed his superstitious, because the Germans, or these guys were these, up just like Britain, the upper echelons of the Germany's military, bankers, spies, very big into the occult. Maybe that elevated their faith in him. But the valuing of the occult in war and spycraft did not start with Crowley, and it would not end with Crowley. And he was the head of the OTO, friends with Royce, who was an occultist and was big friends in Berlin. Thus, Crowley sat in German strategy and policy meetings with people so close in the Kaiser's inner circle. And Germany knew its biggest threat was America joining the war. And stupidly, they listened to Crowley. And he kept claiming the best way to keep them neutral was not by reason, was not by concessions, was not by just like, defending propaganda, showing like, hey, see, we're not the bad guy. It was putting fear in them. And if Germany would showcase its power, America would back down. And his Crowley's bizarreness, his weird sexual preferences, his magic seances certainly added credence to Germans. I think that this guy couldn't be working for the crown. And the Admiralty had briefly at one point considering the using the Lusitania as an armed merchant ship cruiser, and registered it as such in 1914. They refit the ship with 12 6-inch guns, but this would be canceled after the U-boats were sinking the hell out of all of the British ships. And basically, the Lusitania was like the jewel of the British passenger crafts, and they didn't want to lose that. It was a moneymaker. This was how Crowley and thousands of people traveled across the Atlantic. And like I said, Germany had won the war at this point. The U-boats couldn't be stopped. Britain was done. Supply lines were broken. France was done. And the rumors had been around for years of sinking the Lusitania, before it was actually hit. And one legitimate rumor was that it was going to be blown up in New York Harbor with no passengers aboard. And you know what happened? Which that would have been okay, right? If no passengers were aboard, it was sunk. It's a British, that would have kept Americans, wouldn't have really cared about that. And you know what happened? Why that plane was stopped? It was stopped by a German agent who was going to blow up the boat. He was picked up by the FBI and then turned by the British to act as a double agent, so he didn't blow up the Lusitania. So you see, not known by the Germans, this same guy who's going to blow this empty ship in the harbor, he was turned by the British. He also told them, just like he told the Crowley crew, that there were guns on board the Lucy, that British and Americans had to be shown a lesson. And so with him, Crowley, this consensus, it was a no-brainer. So basically, Admiral Hall had used had all these double agents working as spies to convince the Germans to slaughter the hundreds of innocents on the Lusitania. So I think we're going to stop there. We're getting over. Let me just mark stop here. And we're almost done anyway. I got a few more pages, but we'll bang out the rest soon. So, and I just want to read Skeptic's quote. I did find an article from Archaeology Today that divers did find ammunition at this wreckage site of the Lusitania. Interesting. So there you go. That's that. And so again, did they put those guns on boat just to provide, I don't know. It's just, I found that really interesting. So the Germans took out ads in New York newspapers telling the Americans not to travel in the Lusitania. And I knew that, Skeptic. And I think though that I don't know. And so in the book, it like mentions that, but it mentions it that it was written though that exact thing you said about the newspaper ads that was published after it sunk. That they said we told you guys not to sail on this, something like that. I don't know. We'll have to double check on that, so I'm not giving wrong info. But I hope it was a great show tonight. Skeptic, thanks for adding so much. I think we had 16 people on point watching. So thanks everybody for watching. And thanks for all the prayers. Next time we talk, maybe it'll be next week. So what next week, 7 days from now. So I'm seeing Napoleon, right when it comes out. So maybe we'll talk some Napoleon then. But we'll finish Crowley, maybe 1 or 2 more episodes. I hope you guys are enjoying the Crowley series because I'm just learning it's putting him in a whole nother level of for me, it's putting him in way beyond just a total degenerate nut job. So I'm Jack Allen, everybody. Thanks, Susan. Blessings to you as well. Go follow me at Kojak Podcast. If you're not, thanks for being so patient with me on my, lack of shows. And thanks for all the support and prayers. And I love all you guys. And we'll talk soon. And that's it. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a great night. Bye.